Okay, now we can start. Okay, so this is the official, we are recording. Hi, I'm Debbie Hockman. I'm the Director of Arts, Culture, and Education at the David Posnack JCC. And happy to present another, what is this called, program of with the lovely Linda Levin, who will be discussing today Beautiful Country by Jian Julie Wang. And a couple of things to tell you. First of all, we had Jian came last April to the David Posnack JCC in our Holocaust Learning Center. And she is not only a beautiful person on the outside, but beautiful on the inside, as you can read from her story. Her story is kind of really fascinating, and that how she overcame a lot to be where she is today. And there is that part where, you know, she has this great identity with her Judaism. And she was really moved when she came to our Holocaust Learning Center, because we have a whole area about Anne Frank. And Anne Frank was the first book that she had read in English. So she really was touched by that, and it made a very special moment for her with us. So that was a really wonderful program that we had. The other thing that I want to let you know is that I have to tell you that.
Excuse me 1 second, Debbie, before you go on. Anybody, if you've got background noise, go ahead and mute yourselves, okay? So we can hear a little better. Good.
I'm gonna try to mute people as we're going through here. I think I got everybody. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're muting you because of background noise. We can hear everything that goes on. That's from your barking dogs to somebody cooking in the back or those type of things, and that's distracting. But we, do encourage you that when we have the conversation part, that you unmute yourself to talk, but then remute yourself, because sometimes you don't realize what's going on. But the other thing that I wanted to just let you guys know is that this is my last time to do this with you. I am leaving the David Posnack JCC. I know.
Yeah, by the way, that's my expression. Okay.
But here's the good news. I'm going to be the director of lifelong learning at Nova Southeastern University. So it's a very exciting change. I'm very excited about it. But with that change, we hope I told Linda, I said, I'm not giving Linda up. So we will figure out how to work Linda at the Nova Southeastern University and get the band back together over there. But the truth is that I that's where I'm going. And Leah Shani you will see her on the next couple Zooms, because she will be taking over. And it's exciting, it's bittersweet, but I've really enjoyed this time with all of you, and I cannot thank you enough for what you give to me also. So thank you for being part of my story here at the JCC, and I hope I will continue to be part of yours as I move on to my next place. So that is all I'm going to say.
So you can all imagine how, you can hear me? Yeah, I'm not on mute. Okay, you can all imagine how I felt when I heard this news about Debbie, but I say to her, Mazel Tov on a wonderful, wonderful career move for her. And of course, I love her, so I am happy that she's able to make this move. They are so lucky to get her. I will tell you though, Debbie, just honestly, what a joy it has been. I love what I'm doing. I love doing this. I love seeing all of you every month. It's so special for me. And so much of it is the joy of working with Debbie, because not only is she so competent, by the way, think back, guys, none of us knew how to do Zoom. None of us knew anything about technology, and Debbie didn't either. But she taught herself, and she's just amazing how she was able to pick it up, and she was able to really create our Zoom program. So not only competent, but nothing is too much for her. She never says no. You're such a special person, Debbie, and we wish you wonderful mazel, good health. It's the beginning of a new year. It should be a wonderful, successful, happy, healthy new year with many more years to come, just like that. Okay.
Yes, many. Yes, okay. Thank you. Totally.
Good. So, having gotten over that part, which with a lump in our throat, we're going to move on, right?
Yes.
I'm glad
it's bittersweet. It is. It's very bittersweet.
It's bittersweet. It's bittersweet, but it's in the end, it's all sweet. It's all sweet. So we just,
Yeah.
So, and Leia, by the way, guys, is wonderful, and we're going to enjoy her as part of our group as well.
Leia's
So,
amazing. She really is. And we've worked together for over 10 years, and she is just going to do an amazing job. And we will still be in touch as well. So yes, it continues.
so, you know, if you're ever free at 1:30 on a Thursday, the third Thursday of the month, just chime in from Nova. That would be fine.
I may do that. So, you know, you may be, you know, sorry that you asked.
Yeah, I love it. You know what, anybody, we're a small group today, so anybody who can, turn your camera on so we can see you and we can feel like we're sitting together in a big circle and talking, okay? Because this book has a lot to talk about. But before we move on to the book, let me just go over with you. Next month, we are meeting together on October, what? Do we have that date? The 3rd?
It's October 27th. When you will do News of the World by Paulette Giles.
Oh, I think it's the 20th. Is it the 3rd Thursday, right?
It's the 27th.
Oh, is it? That's the
the
3rd.
27th, because the 3rd Thursday is the Shmini Atzeret issue, I think, or whatever. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, I think that's what we've been advertising. Ooh, wait, let me see.
So
Hold on one second. Hold on.
Okay, and I don't have
the 20th is the 3rd Thursday, which is right after Simchat Torah. Yeah.
after Simchas Torah.
Yeah. And
So
the that's why we're doing it the week after. The library is the 25th in person, and the
I have us down as the 20th, no, but you don't. We're not advertising for the 20th.
no, I have it the following, but
Okay.
I guess we'll get back to it.
Let's talk about this, guys. Okay, so we're going to get it cleared up and we're going to get it down.
Yes,
okay.
and I did forget to say, this is a partnership program with the Sterling Road, the Friends of the Sterling Road Library, who have been amazing to work with. And I really relish that community partnership and hope that'll continue with Nova. So that's something else.
Good. Okay, so News of the World is a wonderful book. And again, when you begin it, if you don't feel quite as engaged, stick with it. You're going to see that it's a really good book and a lot to talk about. We put out the November, we've got Midnight Library. We made a switch for December and January, okay? January turns out to be the big read, which means that everybody in Broward County is going to be reading Infinite Country. So we've got that for January as opposed to December. In December, we put in another book called Eternal. Did anybody read that one yet? It's gotten wonderful reviews and everyone who's read it has really loved it. So it's called Eternal by Lisa Scottoline. Okay. But we'll get all of this information out to you. Okay. So that
actually it's Scottolini.
Scottolini. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, great.
I'm sorry. What is January again, please?
January is going to be Infinite Country. It's what we had down as, I think we had, what did we have that down as, December? I think we did. And you know, it's interesting because when we choose these books, we choose them from reviews and we choose them from word of mouth. And we were really very flattered that all of a sudden we found out that our choice was also so well thought of that it was selected as the big read for Broward County. So it's good. We're going to be right.
Can you just say that one more time? What was the big read?
Infinite Country.
Infinite Country. So that's January. So
that's
then
going to be January.
The other one is the Lisa Scotolini book.
December is going to be Eternal. Yeah.
It's
So
okay.
We just flipped it a little bit. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, great. So the author of this book is named, her name, she pronounces it Chen Julie. And it's funny because it looks like Wang, but she says her name is Wang. But at age 7, she was born, in fact, in China. And at age 7, she moved to Brooklyn, New York with her parents. And for 5 years thereafter, the three of them lived what she says in the shadows. They were undocumented in New York City. Now, what's interesting is she says the Chinese word for undocumented actually refers to the idea of being in darkness, being blacked out. She says because that's how they lived, really in the shadows, staying hidden all the time. This book turns out to be a memoir that follows the family through those very difficult 5 years. It was a painful time for them, combining poverty, manual labor, and the perpetual threat of deportation. in the very beginning of her story, she tells us it has a very happy ending in that she graduates from Yale Law School, and she had been accepted at Swarthmore College for undergrad. And she has become a lawyer, and she was a litigator. And she wrote the story of Beautiful Country, her memoir, on her iPhone during her subway commute going to her national law firm, where she became a partner. And she has now changed her job. She is no longer a corporate lawyer. She actually has been a partner now in a firm that advocates education and civil rights. She believes that the first step to eroding systemic barriers is giving underprivileged communities the kind of legal representation that is typically reserved for the wealthy. She makes no bones about it. When she first got out of law school, she became a corporate lawyer. Why? She wanted to make a lot of money. She wanted to avoid the pain, the hunger that she felt as a child. But of course, as soon as she could, she went into public law, public service law. And she tells us actually that it is so important that these people feel that they have assistance, which her family did not have at the time. A bit about her personal life. What's interesting is she is now married. She got married in 2019 to a Jewish man by the name of Mark Gottlieb. And she wants us to know she has 2 dogs, Salty and Peppers. And we know a lot about her marriage and her courtship because it was written up in the New York Times. She described how she and her husband met online, and she realized in time that he was actually her bashert, meaning that he was meant for her because he had so many similar sensibilities. In fact, he and his brother founded a law firm that helps people with disabilities so that they should, have their civil rights held up in the courtroom. She is currently a member of Central Synagogue in Manhattan. And we're going to listen later to a little clip. I'm trying to manage our time because I wanted to show this clip. And if we don't have time to do it today, then I'm going to suggest that you watch it afterwards. She gives a Rosh Hashanah talk last year, I believe it was, at the Central Synagogue.
I did find it, just to let you know.
You did find it. Yeah, Debbie, I'm worried about the timing because if we have to end by 3, we probably won't have time. So we'll see as we get on with our conversation whether everybody should just watch it on their own.
No problem.
But the bottom line is what she says in this talk, which is a little disconcerting, is that she does not feel 100% comfortable in the synagogue because she feels the most comfortable when she's with fellow Jews of color. And she has founded within the Central Synagogue a special group for Jews of color. And she talks about that in her talk. So you may be interested in seeing that a little later. She tells us actually about, I'm sorry, I just lost you guys. My screen just, okay. Okay, there you are. You came back. I just lost you for a moment. Okay, 1 second. You know what happens when my phone rings, even though I have it silenced, all of a sudden I lose you on my screen. Okay. She talks about how it was that she began to talk openly about her childhood. And here she was very successful on the outside. She becomes this successful lawyer. She's clerking for a judge. And then she tells us one day she goes into the judge and she says, you know what? I've been living a lie. I've been making up stories all along about who I was and how I got to this point. I got to tell you the truth. And she tells the judge how she lived undocumented, what her life was like. And the judge listens with great empathy and understanding. And the judge says, you know what? You have secrets, and secrets have such a hold on us. And then the judge says to her, everyone has secrets, and those secrets all have a hold on us. And they show up later. Very often they show up in adulthood. And what you see, by the way, with this woman, with Chen, everything that happened to her as a little girl later on comes back. And you'll see this when you listen to her speak in her talk at the Central Synagogue. She also tells how it was that she wrote this book, it's one thing that she came clean with the judge, but then she decided to write the book because she talks about the fact that when she became a citizen, a naturalized citizen. Do you remember this part? I think she talks about it in the book as well, and she talked about it in the interviews that I watched. When she became a citizen, she was overwhelmed with joy. When she went to that naturalization ceremony and she was greeted by President Obama on a big video screen, and he says, "Welcome, my fellow Americans." And when she heard that, it was all she had been striving for, she and her parents, all of her childhood. It was so meaningful. But it was when President Trump was elected and all of a sudden the whole situation about immigrants came to the fore. That is when she decided really she had to write this book. She wanted to focus on what it was like to become a new immigrant, leaving the only home she knew, landing in a new land, finding new customs, learning a new language. So certainly she does that. What also was interesting in one of the interviews I heard her give was her parents' reaction to the book. And what do you think her parents' reaction would be? Well, first of all, she didn't want them to read the book while she was writing it. She was afraid they would stop her from writing her truth. And then when the book came out, she was upset that they would be upset when they read it. And sure enough, they were. However, what was interesting, her father tried to explain to her, of course he was upset. If you recall from this story, the father suffered as a child when he was 7 in China. What happened? Do you remember? His brother was arrested and tortured and jailed, and I don't know what happened to him later on, but the truth is the whole family suffered, labeled as dissidents, and they all suffered as a result of the fact that this brother went ahead and wrote an essay that was critical of Chairman Mao. And as a result of that, the whole family suffered. And here she was writing a book telling everything that they were trying to keep hidden. So of course her father was upset. Also, her parents were ashamed of the poverty that they endured. And her mother was embarrassed. Would people think that her mother was a bad mother? So their reaction was, of course, negative in the beginning. However, when the book hit the bestseller list, her parents had a different feeling. Her father explained, you know what? Their secrets are out. No one came after them. The government didn't come after them. And all of a sudden, he had a different feeling. He said he found it healing to read the book. He no longer had to fear about anyone finding out about their status. So I thought that was sort of an interesting thing to share with you. In terms of summary, actually, the whole book is about her life. It is a memoir. And she tells us, first of all, that, of course, the words megua, which is how they refer to America in Chinese, translates directly to beautiful country. And of course, as we know from reading the book, when they get to New York City, it is everything but a beautiful country. Chen experiences overwhelming fear, crushing hunger. Her parents were professors in China, and here her family comes and is illegal. And of course, we know the kind of jobs they have to take to support the family. And we follow her through her childhood. And she talks only about those 5 years, really, right? And she says she does that for a specific reason. She wants to concentrate on the details so that we can fully see what it was like for her living a child's life in those years as an undocumented citizen. Okay, so having told you all that, let's begin our conversation. What did you think of her style of writing as from the point of view of a child? Did you like that? Did you think she was successful writing as a child? Did you like her use of language? Kathy?
I think she was tremendously successful in writing as a child. It was heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
I don't know when I've ever read something that was so poignant and so intimate about what poverty means to a child.
Right.
The hunger was just indescribably horrible for her. Everything about their existence was so dreadful. And the description about when she went to the sushi factory, her mother, it was horrendous. And, you know, it just shed a lot of light for me again, but this I think was the most powerful time I have gained insight into what it is like to be undocumented in this country.
Right. Ethel, did you have something you were going to say, or did I see somebody else? Anybody else have anything they want to comment on as far as your style of
I
writing?
didn't, but I'll say what I thought. It was definitely so insightful, to be able to see the world from her eyes as a child. She has to have been she is a very bright person to be able to recall everything that, happened to her when she was so young. Because, how many people really can recall and pinpoint different events that happened in her life, when she was here as an illegal. And it gives you a different point of view as far as, illegal children.
Yeah.
They take the viewpoint of their parents, and they become very paranoid because her parents were extremely paranoid, and probably
I'm
with good
listening to
reason.
Right.
the book and
So
author, the Jen.
I
know
enjoyed
I
it
heard
tremendously.
it. I heard it.
Susan, did you have something you wanted to say, Susan? Okay. All right. Okay. So I agree with you. I think she did such a poignant gave such a poignant view of what it was like to be a child, and yet I love her descriptions were so colorful. As a child, she's talking about. Remember, she comes on the plane. She's coming over with her mother, and she says, "On the flying machine, the lady with the fake face was now pushing a skinny cart down the aisle." All of her descriptions are so literal, because that's really how a child sees the world. And of course, she has all these memories of her life in China. What was life like for her in China before they came? What are her memories of life in China?
Well, I'll talk again.
Okay.
It was a lovely life for her. She loved her life in China. She was loved by her grandparents and her parents, and I don't recall that she had any sense of danger, really. I mean, they were poor, but she was happy there, as I recall.
She was. And you know what's interesting? She uses the line, "Joy is the song of my early childhood." Now, remember, her father ends up having to flee to America because why? Because he was a professor and they were watching him carefully, what he was saying in his classroom. And he felt so stifled. And remember, he had been labeled a dissident anyway, so they were watching him extra carefully. And ultimately, he flees to America and the family all follows him. So here she leaves this very joyous childhood. And I love the way she describes the loving family that she says. She says, the family, they are always happy to see us, rushing to us in a clamoring wave, a big draping quilt all knit from the same thread. I love that, even knits from the same thread, that they look alike. And the idea of a quilt, that she had this protective blanket around her, the love of the family. And she comes, and what do they have here? No one, right? No one. And so she's a very amazing young child, because we know certain things about her. If I were to say to you now, what are some of the characteristics about her? What are some of the characteristics? Well, to begin, she has this great sense of responsibility. She feels responsible for her parents. Even when the father finally brings the mother over, she goes ahead and feels responsible. I've got to deliver Mama safely to Baba's arms. Lynn, did you have something you wanted to say? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Yeah. We can't hear you. Try it again.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Right now we
What
can
I
hear
was
you.
going to say, she was born during the time in China where there was only allowed to have one child. So she was an only child, and she had all that family that you just talked about and safety in China. And coming to what was called the beautiful country to her was anything but that. So as a child, that must have been very confusing.
And so painful.
And not having siblings and having all of and in China, she didn't talk about, I don't think they had a lot of money, but she didn't talk about being hungry the way she was when they got here as undocumented.
Right. You're
That
right.
was
Matter of fact, she thinks back to the delicious meals that she had, her grandmother made her and everything, right? She has memories of delicious food there.
Yes.
And you know, you brought up a good point about the one child thing. She even felt guilt over the fact that she was that one child because they really needed boys, right? So she even felt
Yes.
guilt that she was the girl who took up that slot. And so she, as a result of feeling this responsibility, she feels guilt. And at one point she says, I carried in my heart the guilt of forcing my mother into the job at the fish plant, the one that you're describing, Kathy, the sushi plant, not just through my existence and my need for food, but by simply always giving her such bad advice. Because if you remember, her mother, she kind of reversed roles with her mother, right?
Yes.
She was giving her mother advice. Here's this kid. And then she felt guilty when it was bad advice. She had this sense of inferiority. Even I love this one line. She says she learned that her blood type was B, not A. She says, it only told me that my inferiority was coded into my blood and my genes. So, you know, she's really coming to this with this sense of responsibility, a sense of guilt. She's very superstitious. Remember that? She says, if, you know, when her mother gets sick, oh, if I can only, you know, cross the street without the light changing, my mother will get well. And of course, the family is very superstitious. Do you remember where superstition played a role also? Do you remember that? Yeah. Well, if you remember, what's the one thing she loved so
The cat.
dearly? That
The
cat.
cat.
Did you remember what happened with the cat?
Oh,
Yes.
Cat.
Bad luck.
He had
Bad
an
luck.
asymmetrical face, and that was bad luck. And so, obviously, what happens ultimately with the cat that she loves, the one thing she could nurture and care for, it's taken away from her. Exactly. So, we see that she's a typical child. She loves her toys. Wasn't that moving when she goes into the trash and she finds toys that were thrown out and she takes them home? But of course, the other thing that she has going for her is she loves what? What does she love?
Reading.
What?
Reading.
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 Library.
Did you say reading?
Yes, and the library.
In the library, absolutely. That is the most important thing for her. These become her friends. Clifford the Red Dog and the Berenstain Bears and the Babysitter Club. All of a sudden she'd read those books and feel like, oh, these are my friends. These were her only friends at the time. Now, her parents are really doing a good job of giving her instructions how to live. And what do they say to her? What do her parents say to her? How should she be behaving in America?
Keep her
She
head
should
down.
never talk to
Keep your
policemen.
head down. Don't talk to policemen. What else? Don't trust anybody. We can only be safe with our own kind. Life is dangerous here. They don't want us here. I mean, can you imagine laying all of this on a kid? It's really a very tough thing, right? So she's growing up now with all of these fears of people. And we see also that her parents have no choice but to say these things to her because they themselves have such fear of their situation. And what is the biggest fear that they have? What's their biggest fear, the parents?
Deportation.
Deportation. The government, like in China, governments come after you. And in this case, what they're going to do is deport them. In fact, there's one line that she says, in the vacuum of anxiety that was undocumented life, fear was gaseous, she writes. It expanded and filled our entire world until it was all we could breathe. The anxiety of deportation, being undocumented, it was the only thing. So here we've got these parents. Let's talk a little bit about the parents. They were professors in China. They had wonderful jobs. They were well respected. And they come here, and what happens? What happens? They're living in the shadows. They have to take menial jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her father says that when he was in China, he was a full man. And what does he hear when he comes here? He becomes docile. He's looked at as being weak, right? And so all of a sudden we see this change in him, and and the mother who had been this well-regarded professor, all of a sudden she writes this, and then she goes to the sweatshop where the mother worked. I watched as Mama turned into a hunchback, taking a label and placing it on the seam of a shirt by the neck. And she's, of course, in the lowest paying role in the row, right? She has to put on the labels. The people that got to sit in the front had the better job. They were sewing on buttons and they made a few pennies more. So she sees this, and she sees her mother go to this processed salmon sushi plant, and she had to stand in ice water for 12 hours at a time. And she writes, the fish smell stayed on our skin and in our hair until the next washing, and we did not stop shaking from the cold until long after we wrapped ourselves deep in our comforters. Can you even imagine that what she's describing here, right? So we see that her relationship with her parents changes, and mostly her feelings for her mother are very strong. Her mother turns out to be a very strong woman, but she does get angry with her father. And do you remember why she gets angry with her father? Her father is so affected. Yeah, go ahead, Ethel. Yeah.
Well, she saw her father, she realized her father slapped her mother at one point. So she was pretty angry about that. And she was, not happy about the way he treated the cat.
Yes, right.
And
So she's
also,
very,
he
yeah.
was having an affair, right?
Exactly. And you know
Yeah.
what? Even all of that. So, the mother goes ahead and confides in her and into this kid. I think Baba's having an affair. And then sure enough, she goes to the office and she sees, of course, he's with this woman. And she says in her writing that she never looked at her father the same way again. So her father, what really bothers her too is that when her father was in China, he spoke out. And the reason he had to flee was that he spoke out so much. But he gets here, and when the mother gets sick, and they're afraid to go to the hospital because she's undocumented, and finally they do go to the hospital, all of a sudden her father is afraid to ask questions. He's afraid to speak out what he's feeling, anything. And she looks at her father and she thinks he's more Chinese here than he was in China, because all of a sudden here he's acting like Americans think Chinese people should act. Don't call attention to himself. Don't speak out. Don't ask any questions. That's what they wanted you to do in China. And there he didn't do it. And in America he is. So she's feeling this frustration with her father as well as this anger. Fortunately, that does dissipate. When the mother goes in the hospital, they do get close again. And it was so sad, her excitement at getting that little toy. Do you remember she gets that Tamagotchi or whatever? I had to look up what that was. I don't know if you knew what it was. It's an electric handheld pet. And she had this little pet, this little toy, and that really, really satisfied her. But what was the thing that really put Mama, really put her over the brink? What did he do that really was so disturbing to her? Yes, he slapped her. What
He
else?
bought a car.
Yes, he bought the car. And he buys the car because he wants to feel like an American. What else? Why is she so angry? Why is she so angry at him?
Well, he didn't ask her.
The family is living on $20 a week for food, right? He didn't ask her. He went ahead and bought the car. Yeah. So she is so angry, and she wants to leave America, right? Where does she want to go? Do you remember? She talks to her friend who works with her, and the friend who lives in Long Island tells her that Canada is welcoming immigrants at that time. And so at that point, she packs up the family. And when I say the family, she packs up her daughter and she leaves the husband and she goes to Canada, right? And at that point, life becomes somewhat normal for Chen Julie. I want to talk a little bit about her experience in the school when she was undocumented. What was her experience with the teachers? Do you remember? Her experiences with teachers.
Well,
So terrible.
They looked down on her terribly.
They did. They looked down on her terribly. And the teachers, one of the teachers says to her, "How come you keep wearing the same overalls every day?" Totally clueless, oblivious to the fact that these kids are actually starving, let alone, not having money for clothing. So what else? And he says, "How come you don't bring in any money for the field trips?" Totally clueless. But the other thing that's so painful, the guy's name was Mr. Kane in this story, Mr. Kane. Mr. Kane says to her, he calls her up one day and he says to her, "You did not write this essay." He says, "No, no, 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 you could never have written this. Your outer shell does not match this talent." What's he really saying to her? What's he really saying to her? As a Chinese person, you could never do this. You could never have accomplished this, right? Yeah. Lynn, did you have something you wanted to add? Go ahead and just leave yourself unmuted. Yeah. Yeah. Did you unmute? No, you're not unmuted. Try it again. Try to unmute one more time. We can't hear you.
Okay, now?
Oh, now we can
Okay.
hear you. Leave yourself.
It says the opposite on my screen, but anyway, Mr. Kane, rather, the teacher, recognized that she could write, but he was going to do everything he could not to give her credit for it,
Right.
because you said it didn't match the way she looked, but he did know she could write. So that was like another blow to her, that she did something very well, but no one would recognize her for it.
But what does she end up having to do to convince him that it's her writing? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
She actually goes ahead and deliberately misspells
Right.
things
Oh, okay.
and makes grammar mistakes so that he'll believe that she really was the talented writer. It was crazy. Yeah, the teachers. Fortunately, she had a few teachers that were very loving and very supportive, and she talks about them as well. But what was really painful was, hearing those stories about the teachers. The other thing that was really painful about her school experience, how about the poverty that she experiences? It's one thing that she had to wear the same clothes, but she also had to take vouchers for lunch. And if you remember, that was so poignant for me. Did you guys feel the same way when she was describing the lunchroom?
Mm-hmm.
There's one paragraph. She says, "I stand in line with my back stiff and straight against the wall, holding my place in line with the other poor, unfed, unwashed kids. It would be several more minutes before the rich kids trickled in, lovingly carrying their multicolored lunch bags full of homemade food. And though we poor kids were the first ones to arrive, we were the last to eat. The poor kids never looked at each other in the eye because we didn't want to focus on the fact that we were just like the hungry, stinky kids standing next to us with an itchy, flaky scalp and an itchy, dry throat." I mean, how sad was that? You know what was interesting, by the way, just as a little aside? When I did this with our library group on Tuesday, a lot of the women were talking about when they grew up, some of them grew up very poor, and they talked about the fact that they had vouchers. And they talked about how they hated to use those vouchers. And sometimes, as she did in this story, sometimes they chose to go hungry rather than use their voucher. That's how embarrassed they were about the poverty. So that part is not unique to this experience as an immigrant. Unfortunately, it's something that that the poor suffer with, I'm sure, all the time. Any other comments about her school experience?
I found it interesting, her descriptions of friendships.
Ah, good. Yeah.
Some were friends, but many weren't.
Right. Do you think that the friend thing was universal, or was that unique to her immigrant experience?
I think it was different for her because she was an immigrant, definitely.
Yeah. I think a lot of it was, especially the language situation. Do you remember their family spoke Mandarin? And even times when she was with other Chinese kids, what language did they speak?
Cantonese.
Cantonese, yeah. So there was a difference. They right away she was considered a lower class because she spoke Mandarin, even though her parents told her that Mandarin was the language of the more educated. But she had a language barrier even with the other Chinese kids. But some of it I really thought was just mean girl stuff. The one friend Jane who says, "I'll be your translator when I feel like it." It's like that kind of thing. So some of that I thought was universal, but unfortunately, a lot of it was due to her being an immigrant. Where did she find joy? Where did she find joy? Well, you already hit on one of them.
Her cat gave her great joy.
Her cat gave her joy until it was taken away from her. Ethel, what would you say? Because you told us before. What really gave her joy?
In the library.
In the library. She talks about the library. She gives it its own section. How much she loved the library, how comfortable she felt in the library, how all of those characters from her books became her friends. And that gave her such joy. Anything else you can think of? I'll tell you what I loved. I loved that whole scene when she talks about going at Christmas time to Rockefeller Center and Fifth Avenue. Do you remember that? She loved it. And she said she loved the music and she loved the lights and she loved the windows. And it's so festive at Christmas time. And she says, as an adult looking back, she says, if she traces back, that was the first time that she ever realized that there was actually a reason why America could become or could be called the beautiful country. It was that time at Rockefeller Center when she felt such joy. So we know what kind of saved her as a child. We know that reading saved her, books saved her, her own driven personality, her dream of someday going to Harvard, that saved her. How about how brave she was when she wants to go to the lab school and her father, who's becoming very Chinese, says, "Oh, no, don't. That's for white kids. Don't you do?" And she says, she decides that she's going to apply on her own, and she does. How brave was that? She makes the decision on her own to go. So we see that that's what saved her and her teachers, those few teachers that were so wonderful. Why do you think she chose the name Julie? She calls herself in the interviews, she's introduced as Chen Julie. That's her name. Why did she choose Julie? Do you remember? It's very telling, actually.
Was that, I know she loved the name. Was it a doll or was it?
The Chinese character in a puzzle piece. It was a puppet. Yeah, you're a puppet. And she loved the fact that this was a character that had friends and had a supportive family and had all these things going for her, which of course she wished she had. And so she chooses the name Julie. I want to ask you, first of all, what do you think was the takeaway message in this story? I mean, the author writes this very powerful immigration story. What does she want us to take away from it?
Well, I think she wants us to take away the struggle and the strength that's required to move through this system.
To appreciate that strength and realize it.
Yes, I think there was a newfound appreciation for this country eventually, and that's something that really was profound for her, given her background and her horrendous experiences, that she really ended up with a good life here and a safe life. But it took tremendous gumption, it took tremendous strength, and not everybody has that.
And you know what, Kathy, when you look at these clips, which I'm not sure we're going to have time for today, but when you look at these clips, and what you do is you go on YouTube and you put in her name, put in the author's name, and you'll see it'll come up with a bunch of things. And one of them is her talk for Rosh Hashanah. And there's another one where she talks, it's 14 minutes long, and it talks, you'll know when you look at it, it tells the time. Rosh Hashanah is 11 minutes, and the other one is 14 minutes that I'm going to suggest that you see. Because in that, you see that even when she goes to college, she doesn't feel that she quite fits in. She wasn't prepared for college. Her childhood has definitely taken a toll on her adulthood. You do come to see that in both the college talk, when she talks about college, and when she talks about her feelings as a member of the synagogue at Central Synagogue. So there's no question that the childhood has definitely played a role in her adulthood. I think that she really wants us, as Kathy says, to appreciate what the undocumented go through. And you know, we've read a lot of books. We read American Dirt together, right? Do you remember that? The Mexican experience where they hopped on the trains and they came to this country. I believe, did we read that together? American Dirt. So we've read several books about this experience. This one is unique because it's from a child's point of view. And I think it makes it even more poignant, even more powerful. I also took away from this the importance of like subsidized meals, the idea of free breakfast. I mean, I think there was something in the paper recently about taking away some of these free things. Am I right about that? I don't know, but I think
Yes,
that,
you're right. You're right, because the schools have free meals now, free breakfast, free lunch.
yeah.
So there's no discrimination, you know, where one child says that person has and I don't have.
Right.
So
Right, exactly. And somebody else told me what's really good is that like now that they have the technology, like their parents can put some money into the account. And the kids, they can, you know, hit their app or whatever. And the kids that get the voucher, nobody knows because everybody's hitting their app at the same
that's
way.
all free. It's all free now.
It's all free now. Okay, well, I wasn't even aware of that, but that's really a powerful thing. But I think also she shows the underbelly of the whole legal system. The idea that there was this lawyer who, remember, the father starts to work. Eventually, he goes from working in a laundromat, and then he becomes an interpreter for this no good lawyer. This lawyer tells everyone he's going to make them citizens, and in fact, what does he do? He makes a lot of money for himself and doesn't really help the people. So you see that corruption that goes on. The other thing I found so moving in this was not only their story, but she gives you little slivers of other stories. When she talks about the women that her mother worked with in the sweatshop or in the sushi plant, and she talks about how her mother is working next to this woman who has a stroke. Remember this story? And the woman dies. And they go through her personal effects and they find she has nothing. And they find that she has no friends. Nobody comes to visit her. She has no family. She dies totally alone. And it makes you realize that some of these people that come over by themselves, they are totally alone. The other story that was heartbreaking was about the woman that comes over and they talk about how they have to pay off their snakehead. They have to pay off the guy that brought him over. And so they're so busy paying off this guy, they can't get ahead. And so this one woman comes over and she's really trying to save money. She wants to bring her son over. Do you remember that? And while she's here in America, her son in China, there is a fire. Her son is burned. And she lives with this guilt. What kind of mother leaves her son to get burned when she comes to America? So you realize the guilt that these people are living with and the loneliness and the hunger that they're living with. So I think for me, that was a big takeaway, a message from this. And in our last few minutes about speaking about this, do you think that this story was different than the immigrant experience for Jews? The fact that it was Chinese. Do you think there was a difference? And even those of you that didn't read the book or haven't finished the book, feel free to chime in now. From what you're hearing about this story, does it sound different to you, or what parts sound similar to the Jewish immigrant experience that either our parents or our grandparents lived through? Any thoughts on that?
Having to hide things they'll go under the radar, so to speak.
The whole idea of being undocumented. Yeah,
Yeah.
because most came over legally, right? Is that what you're trying to say? Right. So the
Right.
idea of being illegal
Yeah.
is a huge piece, right? And you know that hopefully they were trying all along to be able to become naturalized citizens. It was hard then, and it's even harder now, probably, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts about that?
I think the Asians had one more strike against them in appearance. Their eyes, they were very, always focused on their eyes being very different than, the Europeans.
Yes.
So I think that was one more strike. Although, when the Jews came over, they had to have a sponsor. There was no, like, as far as I know, illegal coming to America,
Right.
that type of thing. You weren't an illegal in this country without having had a sponsor.
Right.
I thought that with the Jewish immigration, many of them, their sponsors were family.
Yes.
And there was nobody here.
Kathy, you and Ethel just brought up to me, the biggest difference. The idea of having sponsors meant that it was family or dear friends that brought you over. And so you had somebody, maybe not happily, but there were welcoming arms to take you in. And these people had no one. They had no one. Even among their Chinese community, they spoke Mandarin, so they were sort of isolated in that way, right? So they really, her childhood, she had no one. And the other thing that someone mentioned to me, that whose parents were immigrants, she said that they were helped by the Jewish community, by HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Did you all hear of HIAS before? That was available. So there was a little bit of a safety net for the Jewish immigrant, because they did come over legally, as we pointed out, as Lynn points out, but also the idea that that there was a safety net of the community and the family, which is something that they didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
You know what else really struck me about this? How she had to become older as a child. She had to. She was far beyond her years. Even what she was exposed to, when she talks about on the subway, and she talks about the fact that she watched these different guys, one guy hitting on people, she sees it, and how she sees another guy exposing himself. Do you remember that, all that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
She's 7 years old, 9 years old, however old she is at that particular juncture. And then there's one point where she says, actually, a guy was following her. Do you remember that part? That was so frightening. She says she remembers a man on the subway who followed her with a glint in his eyes. She had never seen him before. She says, she ends up kind of doing, zigzagging streets. I may have lost that man, but his specter stayed with me. From that day forward, he crept behind me on every street I walked in. So you see that all of these things, they stay with you. They shape you.
Yes.
Any other thoughts that you want to share about the book that struck you? Any of her memories?
Well, it helped me get through it, because I knew she was going to be okay, and that she actually was going to thrive and have a really great career and successful. That helped me.
And Kathy, people have asked, why did she tell it in the beginning of the story? And I think it's for that exact reason, just what you said.
Yeah.
All of us felt like, oh my God, thank goodness there's a happy ending, that's what you really want to hear. Yeah.
Yes.
Any other thoughts anyone wants to share, or any questions that you have if you haven't finished the book or anything? I want to share with you. So, and then I'm going to ask you, those of you that want to stay on, perhaps Debbie can go ahead. And Debbie, will you have time to show the video or no? You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I will. I just have to, I took it off, so let me just go find it. Let me go find it.
Okay, no problem, because those of you that do you want to stay on? So by a show of hands, how many would like to stay on and watch it? Yes? Okay. So let me, before we do that, while Debbie's finding it, I want to read you something I thought was very beautiful. So there was a New York Times book review that was written. It was written up in the New York Times. I'm going to read you one little paragraph that this book reviewer ends his review with. Okay. So this is the reviewer writing. Normally, when I finish a book, I stand in front of my shelf trying to figure out what I want to read next. When I finished Beautiful Country, I picked up my passport instead, inhaling the scent of its pages. Wang's powerful story reminds us how lucky we are to have the privileges unlocked by this little blue booklet, and what others risk and endure every day in hopes of getting one too.
Beautiful.
Is that beautiful or what?
Yeah, beautiful.
I thought that was just something we really needed to add to our discussion.
It brings tears to my eyes.
It really does. You know, we take so much for
So much for
granted
granted.
in this country in so many ways. And when you read her story and you realize what kids do live through, and how people live and how they do their best and still suffer, you know, there's a lot to be thankful for. Yeah. Okay, so I want you to
We
hear
have the
this.
video. I have the video.
Which is this, the Rosh Hashanah one?
Mhm.
Okay. So
Um,
Deb, you could fast forward it to about 1:30, something like that, because we could start where she starts talking. We don't need to hear the intro from the. So
rabbi.
again, the rabbi from this synagogue, what they do is they ask members of the synagogue to sometimes speak, and they invited her to speak. And I'll be interested in hearing a little bit of your feedback at the end. Okay.
The one thing I was going to say, sometimes for whatever reason, transmission wise, it's easier if you turn off your cameras and your mics, and then you'll be able to hear, but I just want you to, you know, for some reason, whatever works,
And-
works. I
And
don't know
then,
why.
and then be sure to come back because I want to talk about it. Okay.
Right, then we can, oh, do you want me to go? I'm gonna go right where she comes.
Yeah,
on.
where she starts talking.
Comes on about, let's see here. Oops, she's
And
walking.
this is going to go about 11 minutes, guys. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Ready? Y'all can see it?
Yeah. Thanks, Debbie.
No problem. So much.
We need the sound, Deb.
Make it.
We're still, Debbie's trying to get the sound going. Debbie, we're not getting sound. Oh, well. Debbie, can you hear me?
Yes,
I
Linda.
learned
Yeah.
fun.
Oh, okay. I was going to say we could let it go, but good. I think you got it.
My parents and I made our home in a single room full of love, laughter, and furniture from the sidewalk trash. On the day I found prayer, or really prayer found me, I had locked myself in the bathroom we shared with our many roommates. It was the only place I could find real privacy, at least when I ignored the angry knocks on the door. And on that day, I sat as I always did on top of the toilet lid. Usually I had a book with me, but that day I was completely alone. My hands cupped to my face, bloated from tears. My parents, the only two people I trusted in the entire Western Hemisphere, were fighting again. It was a new ritual in America, where it seemed no matter how fast we moved, we could never outrun the cloud of poverty, the fear of deportation, and our waning hopes. At this point, I did not know religion. I had never been introduced to God. I knew only that I felt so very alone. But as I sat there with my stomach turning over itself, I heard a new kind of call. Without even registering it, I slid off the toilet lid and kneeled in front of it. I raised my clasped hands before me and found 5 words. Please let everything be okay. I was hooked from there. Every day I went and found my sanctuary. I did it even as things got worse, even when I barely had the energy to mutter the word please in a chain for minutes on end, rocking back and forth as my loneliness dissolved against the force field of my words. My husband will tell you that I still lock myself in our bathroom today. You might say, only God knows why. Or as Rabbi Buchdahl suggests, you might even say, how adorable. In today's Haftarah, an infertile Hannah exemplifies the life-giving force of true prayer. The courageous kind of prayer that airs to light our deepest vulnerabilities. This kind of prayer is so rare in adulthood that Eli mistakes it for drunkenness. In my childhood, I engaged in daily prayer not because it changed anything outside of me. As we have seen in this pandemic, in that cave of survival, it's not really external change that matters. No, in our darkest moments, what matters is that prayer changes us. On that first day, I found something to believe in, a faith to keep company with. The words of Rabbi Joseph Albo from 15th century Spain still ring resoundingly true. Prayer does not change God. It changes we who pray. For me, as for so many Jews of color, praying in synagogue demands vulnerability in the extreme. It hurts to wear our skin here. At every synagogue I've tried, and I've tried many, I am assumed to know nothing about my own religion. Recently, a study conducted by Stanford University found that 80% of American Jews of color have experienced discrimination in Jewish settings. 80%. That's higher than our country's vaccination rate. And I thought I would get used to it, but I never have. And that might be the most Jewish part about me. I can never seem to get used to injustice. So I will let you in on a new ritual. Before I enter any Jewish space, I pause, I breathe, and I gird myself for the dehumanizing interrogations, the mirthless stares, the questions about the kind of Asian I am, and the lists of Asians that people have known or have dated. But I have to admit, this ritual is not so effective because each time the comments materialize again, I dissolve back into that loneliness of my childhood. I long again for my bathroom sanctuary. I even regret being Jewish. Why, I ask, are white Gentiles treated better than I am in my own house of worship? Was this what Hannah felt when her prayers were misunderstood? But there's also the healing power of Judaism. I am never more at home than when I am with my fellow Jews of color, my extended family. And all of the magical moments of my life have happened during the days of awe. In fact, during my first Yom Kippur fast, I found myself attending services in a public school cafeteria. And it was there in front of the serving station where I would have received my first meal of the day, that free lunch, that I finally reclaimed my power from hunger. That little undocumented girl has somehow found her way home. The days of awe are a time of teshuvah, of return. And as we return to praying together in services, I pray that we return to our roots. Ours is the religion of the displaced, the marginalized, the enslaved. There's a reason Rabbi Heschel marched alongside Dr. King and Selma, remarking, "My legs were praying." So at the threshold of this great year 5782, I ask each and every member of this powerful congregation, when did you first learn to pray? Might it have been a time when you too felt lonely, lost, hungry? May this Rosh Hashanah recall us all back to that time. And may the wisdom of that pure vulnerability light our way into the new year. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay. Can you guys come back on?
Okay.
Okay, so what do you think?
Okay. She's got mixed emotions there. I mean, like in one breath, she found religion, and then she's saying, well, they're against people of color. It's like she's torn. She's still torn. I don't know. That's the feeling I got. She just hasn't quite gotten through. I don't know. I thought Jews are more accepting. We come from all different kinds of nationalities. We're not just one kind of Jew. We're from all different countries. So the discrimination sounded really strong in her personal reaction. I don't know whether it's true at other synagogues or not.
I know. I found that really quite unusual too. Yeah. Go ahead, Suzanne. Yeah. Suzanne? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Unmute. Okay. I know that temple, and it's extremely liberal, extremely modern. And I'm just so surprised that she found such prejudice there. I'm totally shocked.
Right. And you know what, Suzanne, that's the synagogue where the rabbi is a Korean woman, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She was a cantor originally, then she became a rabbi. She's
Right.
amazing.
You know what? Put your video on. We lost your
Oh,
video.
okay.
Good. Okay.
But
Yeah.
I don't think she's just talking about that synagogue. I think she's talking about just generally how it is for her when she walks into synagogue, because, you know, people judge based, like, why are you here? Like that type of.
Well, but she lives in New York, and that is her basic synagogue.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying, I think it's her experience, you know, that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's just her experience. I don't know necessarily it's that synagogue.
It just bothers me that Jews should be so prejudiced. We have enough of our own prejudice, and for us to be prejudiced is terrible,
I've seen
in my
it.
opinion.
I've seen it happen in my own synagogue, to tell you the
Yeah.
truth. Like,
You
when
have
people-
seen it in your
yeah,
synagogue?
because we, you know, we have, it's pretty multicultural, but the thing is that when there are different from different cultures, and people are like, why are they here, or what's going on, or who are they with, or are they adopted, or they, you know, like there's those kind of,
Right.
you know, so I can see how that would have happened.
When did she convert, or when did she decide pick Judaism? Is that just because of her husband?
I
Or was-
don't know. You know what? I don't know.
It wasn't just my husband.
Go ahead, Debbie. Go ahead.
When she came to talk to us, it wasn't just because of him. I mean, it was definitely, he was the, he showed her Judaism, but it wasn't the reason that she converted, because he didn't want her to convert. He didn't ask her to do that. It was something she felt. She felt like she had a belonging.
Well, what's interesting is that she is a founder of this whole Jews of Color group in Central Synagogue. So she does have a wonderful place. But to me, one of the takeaway messages is to be more sensitive to that, you know, I also am surprised that she ran into that type of discrimination, but if that's true, then we do all have to do better. I don't know.
Absolutely.
You know, it made me think also when she was saying how people would say to her, what type of Asian are you? Or my friends, it's like when people say, oh yeah, some of my friends are Jews, you know, some of my best friends are Jews. That's probably what she gets about, oh yeah, I dated an Asian girl, you know, that's probably how she feels. You know, it's tough because you think, in a way, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were trying to make conversation and reached out to her. I don't know.
She's very sensitive. She's very sensitive, very observant. And, you know, she zeroes in on these feelings that are out there, you know, whether or not we're aware of them. We do broadcast these feelings of, you know, whatever it is, prejudice, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're kind of, look, we come from a generation where it was there all the time. And now it's like we're trying to cut it out. But everything you say now is considered racial. You know, you talk about anything, and if you say something that was very acceptable, say maybe 5 years ago, you're a racist, or you're saying something that's, you know, racist like.
Right.
Yeah.
Two things impressed me. One, I saw the courage that she certainly had as a child and throughout her whole life. I mean, this took a lot of courage to say those words.
Right.
Really, right.
A lot of courage. And I too am a bit confused by it. But I have a Chinese Jamaican daughter-in-law, and who, you know, she's family. And she's American born. And I asked her once if she, you know, experiences prejudice. She said, oh yeah. I was so surprised because she's a professional. She's got her doctorate in physical therapy and she has this great job. And she said, well, it comes out in people saying, so where are you from?
Mm-hmm.
She said, that's always, you know, people ask me that all the time. So where are you from? And other things. And she just takes it in stride. And I do think sometimes it is really truly said as a way of reaching out and of being nice. And we just don't realize it.
Kathy, you know what somebody mentioned in one of my other groups? They said, you know, what's the first thing when you meet people? You say to them, Oh, so where did you grow up? Where are you from? You say that. You really,
Yeah, of course.
oh, you're from Ohio? I'm from Ohio. You're from New York. Oh, my sister-in-law's from New York. I mean, you
I
make
know.
connections,
But it's
but you're
different.
right.
That is
But
different.
it's different. It's different. And they take it different. And, you know, one of the things that's such a takeaway with this book is that all of us are so shaped by childhood experiences and memories. And whatever, it might not have even been reality, but it was our perception.
Our perception of reality.
So, you know, she's bringing with her that her whole experience of her childhood as well. So you're right. Things that you don't think are going to be offensive could very well be. So it does make you, make you more sensitive.
It's
Any
tricky.
other thoughts? My takeaway from this whole thing is that she, and by the way, she talks about the fact that she's had therapy and that continues to go, you know, through therapy, which I would think someone would have to, with the kind of childhood that she did have. But anyhow, she's an amazing woman. She writes beautifully. She speaks beautifully. She's gorgeous to look at. So I think we're going to see a lot more of her in.
I hope so.
Yeah, I really think so too.
Right.
Good. Well, good. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. It was great being with everybody. I want to wish everybody a Shana Tova, happy healthy New Year, and we wish our Debbie not only Shana Tova but many more years of good health and happiness and success.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
For
I'm
everything.
still in shock.
Sadly.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody really Shana Tova, and really thank you so much for being a part of today and all of these that we've had. And Linda, as always, the lovely Linda Levin. It's
Oh yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you.
To the Friends of Sterling Road Library for partnering with us
Thank you.
on this
Thank you.
partnership. So definitely tune in next month. Leah will be here, but we will still be here. So we look forward to seeing you then.
Looking forward to seeing everybody.
Good luck, Debbie. Yeah. good
Thank
luck.
you.
Good luck, Debbie.
Bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Shana
Thank
Tova.
you.